Welcome back to Holiness to the Lord, and this time we'll be covering the book of Proverbs. In Proverbs 1, verse 31, eating of the fruit of their own way. Those who reject God are essentially making the same mistake Adam and Eve made, but Adam and Eve did so in innocence, where those who do with knowledge are sinning and rebelling. So, In chapter 2, verses 2 through 6, this describes using your ear to essentially hear the words of the Lord, your heart to apply understanding, and your voice to cry in prayer for knowledge. And it culminates in God revealing wisdom and understanding to you by revelation. Cool parallel to the form of initiatories. In Proverbs chapter 4, verses 17 through 18, it contrasts the bread of wickedness and the wine of violence, presumably with the shewbread and wine of the tabernacle, because it talks about a shining light on the path, which both alludes to the light from the menorah in the tabernacle, as well as the light from the Lord's presence. In Proverbs 10, verses 9 through 11, there's a reference to walking uprightly, which is again frequently used as reference to the path through the tabernacle back to God, and the mouth of a righteous man is a well of life. This goes to several of Christ's teachings and is related to temples, that living waters are part of the cleansing process in the tabernacle, that Christ and his Gospels are living waters, and that living waters flowed out of the tree of life to all the known earth in the Garden of Eden. Not to mention Christ's teachings that what goeth into a man is not nearly as important as what goeth out of a man, that the things we say are an indication of who we are and who we are becoming. And the temple is all about that process of becoming like God, so that when we see him, we may be like him. In verses 16 through 17, just a few verses later, it talks about the labor of the righteous leadeth to life. This seems like a very plain echo of God telling Adam that by the sweat of his brow or his labor he will eat his bread or maintain his life. The point here seems to be that the righteous labor leadeth to life, but there are works of evil that will not sustain one in this life or the next. There's also talk about the way of life and how that is connected to keeping instruction, because temples and the presentation and ordinances are an opportunity to receive instruction from on high, if only we have ears to hear. In Proverbs 22, verses 1 through 4, and then in verse 23, it's cool and interesting that these verses lay out things that are both more important than money and also unattainable through money. Specifically, a good name is preferred over riches. Because you see, there will be those who offer you riches or money in exchange for your good name, because Satan wants everyone to think that everything in this world can be bought, including things from God, like the gift of humility, or even promises and covenants. It's also cool in verse 23 that comes later. It says, one should not sell wisdom, instruction, or understanding. Very interesting temple themes that seem to be directly drawn into the current presentation. In chapter 25, verses 2 through 5 and then 9 through 10, it is the glory of the God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out the matter. Doesn't get more temple than that. It's interesting that this concealment is very similar to the phrase, the mysteries of God, and Solomon seems to think it's important for God's children to search out those matters. And the matter seems to pertain all the way up to the heavens and to the depths of the earth. And there's talk of refinement and purification, as if the process is similar to becoming a finer vessel before the Lord, and it is to all establish a throne in righteousness. So, if God is our Father and we are joint heirs with Christ, there's a promise that one day, if we are faithful, we will be called up to become a king upon a throne of glory to fill the measure of our creation. Oh, and also don't reveal secrets to another person in verse 9. It's interesting this idea is put so close to these other ideas in these verses. And finally in Proverbs 30 verse 4, it's interesting that ascending and descending to heaven is mentioned. This reminds me of Jacob's ladder and the experience where God came down and took those who accepted covenants back up into his presence. It's also interesting that God's creations make up his garments, and that the scriptures talking about what God's name is and what God's Son's name is, as names, even hidden names and truths, are very closely tied with the temple and experiences like that Jacob and others have felt and seen and recorded throughout Scripture. That's all, and I'll see you next time.